Hello, my name is Ron Moore, and I teach Mexican American history at Yuba College. Not only do I teach Mexican American history, but I love history. I love history, but that wasn't always the case. When I was in high school, I saw history as being the study of dead people and dates and politics and wars. And while some of these things can be interesting, and we will examine some of these things, to me, at the time, they seemed so boring. I didn't begin to love history until I discovered that everything I love has a history. What do you love? It has a history. Your hobbies, there's a history. For me, sports, music, and food, those were the things I loved when I was in high school, and all of those had a history. Fashion, art, literature, poetry, whatever it is that you love, all of those have a history. In History 15, we will look at all of those and more in the context of Mexican American history. Did you know that the first ball games in the world came out of Mesoamerica, Central Mexico, the place of the origin of many of the ancestors of those that we identify as Mexican Americans? Mesoamericans, they loved their ball games. Ball games became some of the most widespread forms of entertainment in all of Mesoamerica. Many of those ball games were similar to the professional sports systems that we now know, with organized teams, oftentimes representing cities playing one another. There were great stadiums where hundreds and sometimes thousands of people could gather together and watch their favorite players play ball games, oftentimes similar to those that we know today. Stadiums and players and uniforms, all of this thousands of years ago. And yes, this is history. Some games were similar to our modern soccer. They also had games where they had rackets and bats, like maybe modern day racquetball and similar to baseball. But there was one huge exception with much of the Mesoamerican sports system. Oftentimes, the winning team would be sacrificed after the victory. Can you imagine rooting for your favorite team to win the World Cup and then watch and cheer as members of that team were sacrificed to the gods? Yes, human sacrifice was common in many Mesoamerican cultures. Many Mesoamerican cultures practice human sacrifice, some on a daily basis. At times, these sacrifices were a form of entertainment, public spectacle. At times, they were religious activities with great cosmic consequences. Some cultures believed that the sun could not rise in the morning without the aid of priests performing intricately planned human sacrifice. Well, I'm glad that my favorite sports teams or any sports teams will no longer be sacrificed to the gods. But sports in Mesoamerica, it influenced many things, just like sports does today. Sports influenced art with great sculptures and paintings created depicting players and games, and sports may have even influenced fashion and music. Musicians, just like we have today, musicians, artisans created wonderful wind and percussion instruments and others. The best known among these were flutes and whistles and drums made of wood and clay. Yes, music is history. If you love music, History 15 might be a good place for you. Some of these percussion instruments are still in use today. Musical instruments were decorated with colorful figures, fashion, portraying wonderful people. Sometimes it's believed even portraying famous musicians of the time. There were elaborate dance festivals, festivals which have continued to be used today, in existence today. Remember, everything has a history. Our course will not only look at Mesoamerica or the foundation and the culture that led to the development of Mexican American history, but our culture will look at life for the descendants of Mesoamericans in the United States, more properly, Mexican Americans. We'll examine the origins. We'll look at issues surrounding race and ethnicity, struggles and victories. We'll spend a great deal of time looking at 20th century developments, the Chicano rights movement, the civil rights movement, when Mexican American community began to insist that their rights as Americans be acknowledged. And all of that is history. We will look at the people such as Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Perhaps you've heard of them and their work to gain fair pay and proper working conditions for farm labor. Their work impacted so much more than the rights of those working in the fields, but had an impact on American labor law, upon the economy in general. We'll look at others such as Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, a professional boxer turned community leader and activist who motivated young people, perhaps just like you, to stand up for their rights and the rights of others, to work for equity and equality. for all Americans, not just those of the hegemonic power group, and not just those of the Mexican American group, but they worked together to improve the nation for all. The struggle was real, the obstacles were great, and so were the victories. I would like to invite you to join me this fall semester to go on a journey that examines the rich, diverse history of Mexican Americans and their experience in the United States. This journey will show us that Mexican American experience in the United States is not a recent product of global migration, but one with deep roots to the land and to the nation itself. Our course will take a long view approach of the subject, exploring the relevant history of the people of Mesoamerica, much of the area that comprises modern Mexico, along with some major events in Mexican history that impact the current experience of those we know as Mexican Americans. Join me on this journey. History 15 at Yuba College will be anything but boring.